years ago at Pelican Island Elementary School under the direction of Miss Baird and Mrs. Swanson. The EcoTroop began as a small group of fourth graders who wanted to learn about nature hands-on. Who knew that we would grow to 50 current members with over 80 alumni who have since moved on to the middle school. It was 4 years ago that my sister and her fellow troopers came to share with you what seemed at the time like a crazy idea. She had taken her family for a tour of the nature trail and explained to my dad the plight of the scrub jay and the fact that its habitat was disappearing. He had suggested that her troop raise money and buy a lot. Well, Rochelle brought this idea to the rest of the troop. They decided to set a higher goal, to purchase the contiguous lots surrounding our school through individual fundraising on our part. We would then donate this property back to the community for perpetuity as a sanctuary to protect the endangered species it contained. Well, crazy as it sounded, you voiced your support, and for that we were grateful.
Hi, my name is Rochelle Esparza, formerly Rochelle Hen, and I was one of the founders of the EcoTroop. I'm currently a molecular biologist. I went to the University of Florida to study biology, and all through my life after being a part of the EcoTroop, I decided I wanted to dedicate it to science and to pursuing ecology and conserving and helping the environment and teaching those in future generations how to do that as well. So how it all started was in the late 90s. I was an elementary school student at Pelican Island Elementary School, and we were learning about conservation and endangered animals. And I decided to take my dad out on the nature trail. We had a huge acreage in the back of the school filled with scrub jays, gopher tortoise, sandhill cranes, black racer snakes, all sorts of little lizards. And as kids, that's like so fascinating. You're just like, oh look, there's a bird and it can come land near you, and there's snakes and there's tortoises, and just all of that as a child is just so wonderful. And so we would go on the trail during school, and I decided I wanted to show my family. So I decided to take my dad onto the trail, and I wanted to teach him all about the animals that resided there, and also the fact that they were starting to lose their habitat because they were endangered. A lot of the scrub habitat was being built up, and there's less and less and less. They need that specific sand to bury their cache and just to thrive and survive. So as we went through, I was explaining all of that to him, and I said to him, why can't we do something about this? How can we help these animals? Because it was sad as a kid, you're hearing, oh, they're not going to be around for much longer. They could disappear, they could die.
And when she came home and said, hey Dad, you have to take a walk on this nature trail and see what we're learning in school, I said, oh, okay, I'll go take a look. She goes, yeah, because you got to see these birds we have. They're called scrub jays. So when she was telling me they were endangered, I kind of brushed it off. But she said, we need to go. So one Saturday, she took me out on the nature trail, and we started walking around, and she goes, hey Dad, watch this. And she puts her hands out, and she starts to make this clucking sound, or clicking sound. And these birds came out of nowhere and landed on her hands. And I said, wow, that's really wild. She goes, yeah, they have no natural fear of man, Dad. I said, oh, that's pretty cool. She says, but they're endangered. There's also a turtle out here, or I should say a tortoise, and it's endangered as well. So we started talking, and I said, well, this is really nice. This is pretty cool. She said, yeah, but the problem, Dad, is development and people building all these houses. The scrub jays are losing their habitat. We need to do something. So we went back to the house, and we were sitting around the dinner table just kind of having a discussion about our trip. And I said, what if you and your classmates got together and maybe did some fundraising? You could buy one of the lots that's next to your nature trail and make it a little bigger. And her eyes got really big. Could we do that? I said, yeah, I think we could do that. I said, but talk to your teacher.
When you talk about pristine in an urban area, it's really hard to have a concept of what that might mean. And so a few years, probably 2 years after we introduced the idea of getting children out to explore the habitat, we had a couple of teachers who were very interested in pursuing something after school, and they wanted to start a club. So we lovingly called the club the Environmental Conservation Organization, or EcoTroop. And with that, these were 4th and 5th graders. What fun. And they just enjoyed so much, they began to personally relate to the animals that lived on this habitat. The scrub jay, the Florida scrub jay. And why would you ask, why would children be so interested in this bird? Well, they merely could walk out onto the habitat, and these birds, being curious and gregarious, would land on them. They thought this was one of the most hilarious, but also one of the most captivating parts of traveling out in the habitat. They also began to understand that this was a very desirable land for builders. And what, as young children began to understand in a childlike way, they saw that just around their neighborhood at this school, bulldozers were bulldozing down the land. And they were using it because it was desirable for builders, because the land drained easily. And so with that, as the teachers became a bit alarmed, they also talked to the children about this was the only habitat these Florida scrub jays and animals could live on. So one day I get a knock on my door in my office, and a group of the EcoTroop came in and said, "Mrs. Swanson, can we speak to you?" And I said, of course, because I had a great relationship with these kids. They were so much fun, and they had really grown. They were becoming young advocates, and I want to emphasize that as we go through this. So they knocked on the door, and I had them all come and sit on the floor. And they said, "We really need to talk to you about something we're worried about." And I said, "Well, what are you worried about?" And they said, "Do you know that there are builders who are going to tear down the habitat for the scrub jays?" And I said, "Well, I'm not so sure about that." And they said, "Well, we saw bulldozers out near the property when we were out hiking." And I said, "Well, what are you thinking?" And one little girl said to me, "Well, my parents and I have been talking about this, and we think we should buy land." And I thought, land? And I said, well, now I'm talking about 9 and 10 and 11-year-olds, and I'm talking about me being a school principal. And I sat back and I said, well, let me look into that.
I'm here from the Pelican Island School EcoTroop. The EcoTroop has done some amazing things. If Rochelle Hemp had not brought the idea of buying the property around our school, who knows where the scrub habitat would be today.
Really all started with rare and endangered birds and the wildlife of the vanishing coastal scrub in the east coast, along the east coast of Florida. And it was being threatened by speculative development that was occurring in the 1990s and early 2000s. And the children at Pelican Island Elementary School, which is surrounded by this kind of very rare coastal scrub, were alarmed at what they were seeing happening in their community. And so they decided that they needed to do something to protect this community of rare and endangered species. And at that time, the Florida scrub jay had just been listed as an endangered species, well, maybe in 1987, but it had totally halted development in the area, in the neighborhood of this elementary school. And a lot of people were rather upset about this, realtors and county officials and others. And the children were upset because they were seeing that if the developers were given the go-ahead, all of their friends on campus, the scrub jays that came into their classrooms, the gopher tortoises that burrowed under their buildings, the snakes they were used to seeing, all of them could go away. And so a couple of these fourth grade students went to their principal, Miss Bonnie Swanson, and said, we want to do something about this. Can we get together and create a group to try to buy some of this land to protect it? And rather surprisingly, the principal of an elementary school said, yes, go for it. we'll be behind you, we'll help you. And so the kids decided that the way to go forward with the help of their principal and their teachers was to reach out to community groups, a whole variety of community groups, to help them on their mission. This was way beyond selling cookies and lemonade at the side of the road.
So we're going to start with probably the person that has been there for us. I don't even know how he keeps his business going. That's Jens Tripson. He is the president of the Audubon. If any of you know the passion that Jens has for what he does, and also, but for us, we needed to have a nonprofit organization serve as a trustee, and his organization stepped forward. And what would we have done without him?
I joined Pelican Island Audubon Society in 1986. A friend of mine had just been elected president, and she called me and she said, would you be our endangered species chairman? And I said, what does that entail? What does that mean? I knew nothing, and it was a very wonderful learning experience. The Audubon people locally, statewide, national, were very supportive of everything we did, and I was just thrilled to be involved. And as things went along, it got better. And what we're here for is to talk about a bunch of kids that wanted to buy some Florida scrub lots. And another family friend, Ruth Stanbridge, was the president of the Historical Society and on the county commission at the time. And she called me and said that there was a group of kids, and they're from a school, Pelican Island Elementary in Sebastian, and that their principal had contacted her that she was representing the kids because they had gotten interested in the scrub lots surrounding the school, and they wanted to buy them. And part of this came out, I think, because the Fish and Wildlife Service had put a moratorium on building on 300 lots, basically. And so that was first what the kids wanted to buy. And I think it got made realistic. Primarily Bonnie Swanson, the principal of Pelican Island Elementary at the time, started, let's start small and grow. And so Ruth called me and asked me if Audubon would help take on this project, be their sponsor, work with them, because none of the other civic organizations wanted to do it. And it was a perfect fit. I mean, that's what Audubon is all about, protecting animals, birds, the ecosystems, and it was just amazing. These are 4th and 5th graders, and they just kind of gave me hope that another generation was coming along that would be interested in defending wildlife and the environment, and it was just phenomenal. We had any number of snags, and it was so nice because Bonnie's view was that we could find a solution.
So as you can imagine, trying to buy land in any area, especially in a protected area where there are animals that are endangered, you run into a few little mishaps or hardships or areas where people will push back. So one of the things that we had to deal with was something involving the school board, where they did not want us to buy certain area around the school. We had to wait for a while. A lot of the land was frozen. We worked with Fish and Wildlife. We worked with the local community, the Chamber of Commerce, and we went to the school board. We became activists, us as the children. We spoke on behalf of these animals who don't have a voice, and we told them that we're not going to sit back, we're not going to let this happen, and that we're going to buy this land.
I love the fact that the school had a scrub jay habitat, which I knew nothing about at the time, but that they were very environmentally conscious. which as a parent, you want to just give your child every perspective that you can about the world in general. Naturally, what they learn in books and every subject they get, but nothing teaches a child like hands-on. And that's what Pelican did, is that because Bonnie was the principal, she encouraged all of her teachers to be more hands-on than just a book teacher, which eventually got me involved with a grant, and I started teaching science at Pelican. And that's what I loved about it, is because I could do experiments. I just had this wonderful scrub jay habitat right in the backyard. EcoTroop was developed during that time that I was there. My kids, my son wasn't old enough yet, but I kept hearing about it and hearing about it and learning about it. And I said, oh my gosh, this is just the neatest thing in the world. And you know, as a parent, you don't want your child to grow up, but I couldn't wait for my child to be in 4th grade so he could be a part of the EcoTroop, because I could see what it was doing. The kids' passion for trying to save the habitat, it just kind of warmed the entire school. It made all of the parents kind of become better friends because they had more of a discussion. It became more of a community school. Even though we lived out of, you know, we kind of lived off the surrounding campus. So we weren't like neighbors with all of the families there because we lived a little bit farther away. It was important because that brought everybody together as a community in that direct school. So we were all talking about it with each other, and then it kind of just kept spreading throughout the community.
As the project developed, it was a learning process for us adults, for the kids, and I think a good one for the kids, because we needed to get various entities on board because of the moratorium with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife on these lots to protect mainly scrub jays, but also gopher tortoises and other animals considered minor, but that were still very important. That the real estate community was interested in lifting the moratorium and selling these lots. The school board presented a stumbling block because they were in a big school development program. They were wanting to build new schools, and they saw using the lots, especially on the 13 acres around the school, to be able to use for mitigation. So they could build school buildings on other places in the county where they wanted to and sacrifice these. We'll put these up for development if you give us those. And you know, and that was really hard, and that was hard to explain to the kids why it was a stumbling block, but they saw it.
So the next day, apparently, she went in and talked to her teacher. And later that day, I got a phone call from the principal and her teacher saying, what a terrific idea that is. But the one lot that I had suggested had now grown into, let's buy all the property there was, as my daughter has said, in Florida. So anyway, we discussed it a little more, and I met with the principal and met with the teacher, and we discussed, you know, we could do bake sales, we could do all these things to try to raise funds to buy this lot. Well, that's how it started. By the time we were finished, we had over 17 lots. We had made presentations to City Council. We had made presentations to the school board. We had made presentations to county commissioners. And we went all the way up to, I believe it was Titusville, to meet with some folks with the state. All in an effort to basically raise funds, create awareness for these birds and these animals that lived on their nature trail. It was quite an experience. It brought together parents, it brought together children. Children were educating parents. As case in point, myself, I told you I thought a scrub jay was a blue jay. No, they're totally different. They're fascinating creatures. It's important that they do have the property so that they can continue to survive, hopefully thrive. And just as a parent, it was an amazing process for me, because the closeness I was able to develop now with my daughter, and by the way, it passed on from my daughter to my son to my youngest daughter, so we're talking about 3 different children, different age groups that all took part in this process.
Since we have bought the lots, we have saved many plants and animals. We have spoken to many different people over the past few years. Most of the people support us in what we do. They listen to us, and they learn. We listen to them, and we learn. We are all very organized. That's why a lot of people listen to us. Miss Gambino, Pal, and the Fish and Wildlife and the Audubon Society support us and help us get through every step of what we are doing. We all keep learning from them.
So I discussed this with the children, and the children, of course, then said, well, what can we do? So they decided to take action. With that, I met with realtors in the area who had told me that they were so angry at the Florida scrub jay. They were angry. They had put their anger toward the animal as opposed to what solutions might be available. So with that group, I began to investigate further. I met with a group of the children and their parents, and I told the parents, your children are proposing to buy land. And I explained all that was happening in regard to this very pristine habitat that, if allowed, the school district could put under mitigation and allow building to occur. So with that, I got a go forward with the parents saying, whatever you think we can do to help save this land, we will do. So with the help of realtors in the area, the National Refuge, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the County Commission, and the City Sebastian, the Council, Sebastian City Council, I then formulated a plan. And of course, in the meantime, we had to go forward to plead with the school district.
And at one of the school board meetings, one of the school board commissioners said, but we're not in the business of conservation. And one of the 4th grade kids who was involved in the EcoTroop stood up and said, but we're all involved in conservation. It's about our life. It's about the life of the planet. And so, you know, to have that kind of energy put forward to adults, and also with the adults, at least from me and pretty much everybody that was involved, we weren't up in arms. We were just trying to explain why this was for the benefit of the entire county, our whole community, and with the primary recipient being the environment surrounding the school and this issue. You know, and I think an example is this went on. At one point we had ABC News come, and I don't remember the Peter Jennings, yeah. And we were out in the scrub and trying to get scrub jays to come so they could photograph them. And they will land on you, as you know, and it landed on the camera, one of the birds, and we couldn't get it to go over to him. It just seemed really fascinated with being on the camera. So, I mean, this thing went from a local thing to getting national news.
So as being part of the EcoTroop, I was given amazing opportunities. Not only did I get to help these animals, but I also got to take this conservation effort to a national level. We got to meet the Secretary of the Interior, Bruce Babbitt, at the time. We went out on a pontoon boat with him and told him all about our proposal, what we were doing, what we hoped to achieve, and that was just amazing just to see these politicians. Typically they don't deal with children directly, they usually deal with, like, you know, other politicians or people speaking on their behalf, so that was amazing. I know that he really enjoyed the ability to get to speak with us and just to see that the generations to come do care and that they are going to care about the world that we live in and these animals and keeping our earth clean and taking care of the environment. We also had the opportunity to speak with ABC World News Tonight. My father and I were actually on there together. And as a kid, you know, thinking back, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just doing an interview. But now as an adult, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. ABC World News, like international. And then we were also on the Children's National Geographic, featured in one of their editions that came out, as well as Nickelodeon for one of their conservation shows as well. So that was wonderful. Just the opportunity to take this to national and even international, to reach people and to inspire and spark interest in other areas around the country and around the world.
So after the national news coverage of the EcoTroop at Pelican Island Elementary School and their efforts to protect the vanishing scrub, the school kids were invited out on a boat tour over at Pelican Island National Wildlife Refuge with the Secretary of the Interior at that time, Mr. Bruce Babbitt. And they were able to tell him the story of what they were trying to accomplish in preserving this vanishing habitat and its endangered species. And after that tour, the undersecretary came back down and met with the kids at the elementary school. And subsequent to that, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, well, Department of Interior through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, cut a big check to help them buy the remaining 17 lots that surrounded the school grounds, and Pelican Island Audubon Society stepped up and took a conservation easement over those lands, obtained a conservation easement so that they would be protected in perpetuity.
So we learned that Secretary Babbitt has set aside $230,000 for a grant for us to continue our work. And my challenge was to get that grant in. We did, and with the support of all of our partners, of which there are so many I cannot even tell you. And we put that grant in and received it. It flowed through the Florida Wildlife Commission, which is a whole other story. But in the meantime, we proceeded to raise another $70,000 by the hard work of our children and parents. Now, in this story, I haven't told you that this is a Title I elementary school. That meaning that at least 70% of the students were on free and reduced lunch. But because our parents and children started to be so more closely aligned to a mission and an action that they had a presence. You know, I think one of the important stories that we hope that you'll hear through this story is that children are able to cut through all of the bureaucratic things that adults always seem to be quagmired in. They are just realists in regard to what does it need, what do we need to do to make this happen. And so they were at every festival. They were at on street corners. We were educating our neighbors in regard to the activities of what we were trying to do. And so what we found is that we created a small school. At the time was 450, but it rose to about 700 by the time I left that school. That they, in their mission, it created one small school, one big impact. And not only did they see the children, but the community began to see this as also part of their heritage, part of their project, part of what they wanted to have happen in their community. So as we proceeded on, it took a life of its own. So we're happy to say that in 2007 we actually completed the purchase of 17 residential lots surrounding the original 13 acres that were set aside by the county and the school district that were set aside as a conservation area. So those 17 lots are part of a easement held by the Pelican Island Audubon Society, and it is now called the Winnegar site. And how it got its name was that our former Sebastian mayor died while in office, and her husband honored her by giving us a large donation, and we felt it quite an honor to name this site after this mayor who lost her life during her time in office. We have to say that the children got to sign a couple of the deeds. We had several deed signings where the children participated in that, and of course many of the students have moved on to graduated from high school, and many are college graduates.
When I was younger, I went to Pelican Island Elementary, where now the Winnegar scrub habitat exists and is in trust for future generations. Just wanted to talk a little bit about my experience at Pelican Island. It showed me what we can do just as young students, imagine what they can do now, to help our environment and save some of these things that will inevitably be lost if we don't save them.
And it was an amazing and extremely well feeling of being heard as a child and helping the community when we all wanted to come together as a group to be heard. And what we did was something that I still live with and remember to this day, because it's something that I think kids need to have to be heard, to make a difference in this community. It goes beyond then of just looking at it as a nature trail. It's something that gives the children self-importance, and it reflects as well on our society. So it's something that I always remember. I still have friends today that we talk about for the scrub jay habitat and all the memories we made. It's something when I drive by, when I head to work and look at the scrub jay habitat every morning, it's a feeling I get of just that award of being part of that community that did something and made a really positive change and impact. And I think that should continue for the kids today, and be taught that lesson. I feel with the future, unfortunately how everything is going on today, we need to come together instead of be divided.
Now being a parent, I can truly appreciate how wonderful it is to look back and know that we accomplished this. I can now take my daughter out to the nature trail, out to these properties. I can show her these animals. I can describe to her what her mom and her fellow peers did with Grandpa's help to save these animals, as well as the community. We had a lot of community help and support. We're so appreciative of everyone who took the time to help out with this and to support us and to encourage us, to educate us, as well as we were educating them. We were just kids, but I feel like we taught a lot of these adults a thing or two. But it's just so wonderful now. My daughter and her future children and children generations down the line will now get to experience these scrub jays, these gopher tortoise, and all the other endangered animals that potentially wouldn't have been there if we didn't step in. And other groups as well stepping in this world. We need more of that. We need more activists. We need more people that care.
As a parent, and shall I say now as a grandparent, this really is very important, and I'm really proud of what they were able to accomplish, because I now know that my grandchildren will be able to walk these grounds, hopefully see these animals that live there, and basically we'll take it even to the next level. They'll be able to show their children the same thing.
Involvement is just so important. You cannot teach that in a classroom. You need to be involved outside the classroom. You need to have students just participate in other things besides a laptop, besides their phone. They need to go out and be involved with people and talk to people, not just by texting abbreviations on a phone. They need to know how to public speak in order to just get their ideas, their opinions, and just to say, hey, I'm important in this world, so listen to me. And that is something that EcoTroop thoroughly encouraged families to do, is to say, hey, kids have a voice too. Let's all listen to them.
You know, so this is all directly related to the children bringing this forward and getting the adults to take the ball and make it happen. And it's just been such a wonderful project, and I think even more now to see kids that are in their mid to late 20s now that were involved in the 6 years I was directly involved, that they're still interested, and some of them live here in the community, and as I said, they have their own kids and want them to continue the legacy, and that's what Audubon really is all about.
Starting out as an elementary school student, learning about the environment, learning in my classroom, but then taking those classroom experiences and bringing them to real life, seeing the scrub jay come and fly in front of me, seeing the gopher tortoises, physically there. It was building that classroom but exterior environment just made a student, being 10, 11, 12, just made that excitement even more. And then not only seeing them, but then going and talking to the commissioners, going to talk to the city council, seeing our actions as a 10 or 11-year-old person, seeing what our actions, what our speeches, what we've done come to fruition, that we were preserving, that we were making a difference. Even as a small person, I could make a difference. My voice counted. My voice mattered. I was heard. And so it really made me excited to not only save the environment, save the scrub jay habitat, but then just build the natural skills that any person needs to go through anything in life.
You can imagine the amount of time that these families have spent with their children. And I think Barbara said it first, she said her child she wanted to put the scrub jays in little condos somewhere off the lots, and that but parents are really the conservationists here, and they support their children's education. Sebastian, Florida is a great place to live, and it's a great place for us to have our children growing up, isn't it? It is, and I'm blessed to know this. Well, this is the first milestone, because the project is not done. But we have a lot to do, but the first milestone, we did it. What did we do, students? We did it, and we are very proud of our accomplishments, and we thank everyone for all that you've done to support this. And you'll be seeing us again, because we got more to do, but we love it. It's a labor of love. And with this ends from us to you forever. Thank you.